Let's turn to Luke chapter 22 tonight. We're going to read verses 47 through 54. We're going to visit a place we've visited many times over the last years, but I think tonight will be a good lesson for us to think about. Give us some things to ponder over. Luke 22, verses 47 through 54. And while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? When they which were about him saw that what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest, and cut off his right ear. And Jesus answered and said, Suffer ye thus far. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple and the elders which were to come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hands against me, but this is your hour in the power of darkness. Then they took him and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. The story of Jesus at the end is one of the ultimate betrayal. He was betrayed by the very people that he had healed their sick. He had raised their dead. He had fed multitudes, thousands at one time, with very few fishes and very few loaves. He had been followed throughout the countryside by thousands. Everywhere that he went, people came to receive from him the blessings that he was able to bestow upon them. But only a few, toward the end, embraced the teaching that Jesus had given. They understood him to be the Christ. When Jesus asked his disciples, Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Peter gave him various answers. He said, But whom say ye that I am? And Peter said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. They had embraced this, these chosen ones, these 12. And yet we see one of these 12, named Judas, is one who has come to commit the ultimate betrayal. He has betrayed him for just a few pieces of silver. He has sold him into their hands. And when we think about Judas, we think about his betrayal, but we oftentimes forget that there were 11 other disciples, and included in them was John Mark, who scattered in the night. And these were some of his closest allies. Peter was one of those men. Peter followed him, but he followed him afar off, is what the record says. So, in a way, in a likeness, this is not the exact same betrayal that Judas was guilty of, but it's still a betrayal, because Jesus is left there all alone to suffer at the hands of his enemies. As I've said on many occasions, the Bible characters that are discussed in God's book are persons for our learning. And we can look at them and we can learn a lot about others, but more importantly, we can learn a lot about ourselves. We can see ourselves clearly. We can see our life, and we can see the defeats that we experience in life, but we can also, if we'll look far enough and cling to what God has to say, we can see the victory. The victory is the most important thing. The race is of value. We have to run it. We have to run it with patience. The race is of value. We have to run it. We have to run it lawfully. But when we run it with patience and we run it lawfully, he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. There's the victory. It's crossing the finish line. It's not what order we cross in, because we're all going to cross that line at a different place, a different point in our lives, because we're not all going to die the same day. But eventually we'll all meet our Maker. And those that cross that line, standing on the side of Jesus, who have crossed it lawfully, that's the only place you can cross it lawfully. Those who cross that finish line and reach the end of our course of life, standing with Jesus, are always going to be victorious. There are no losers when we stand with Jesus, but not everyone's going to run the race. Not everyone's going to endure. Not everyone's going to run with patience. Not everyone's going to continue to look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Peter's faith had wavered. And so Luke records Peter followed Jesus, but he followed afar off. The amazing thing about the Bible what we often don't do, we don't look at our heroes and mention the bad things. We only talk about the good things. Naturally so, because they're our heroes. Superman could do absolutely nothing wrong because he was Superman. But the Bible, when it talks about supermen and superwomen, in that respect, people of faith, it mentions not only the good and the righteous things about them, but it also mentions the bad. Noah was a man who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And because of Noah, the human race survived. 8 souls were spared by water. But when Noah got off the ark, he planted a vineyard and he became drunk. You could find that about every Bible character mentioned in God's book. Abraham, the man who believed God, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness, on 2 different occasions lied about his wife Sarah and said she was his sister. She was his half-sister. So he only told a half truth or a half lie. Wouldn't that be right? How much of a lie does it have to be before it's a lie? Well, in Abraham's case, it was a lie both times. And the reason was his faith and confidence in God wavered. He didn't trust God to preserve and protect him like God had promised that he would. Even Moses, the man of God who is mentioned probably more times in the Bible than any other Bible character, became angry with Israel's sin. He struck the rock instead of speaking and didn't sanction God in the eyes of the people. And so when it came time for him going to the promised land, Moses was allowed to go up to Mount Nebo at age 120, and there he died, and the angels buried his body. He was not allowed to enter into the promised land. David, the man who was after God's own heart, committed that horrible sin with Bathsheba and then tried to cover it up by having her husband Uriah the Hittite murdered, put at the forefront of battle so that he would die. Nathan confronted him and said, "Thou art the man." In other words, David needed to be aware that his sin was not covered up like he thought it was. He wasn't able to hide it, but he was going to be responsible and accountable. The child that was born of Bathsheba died. That was David's punishment. But then later on, she bore him Solomon, who became king. God wouldn't allow David to build his house because he was a man of blood. It wasn't because of war, but because David had taken the innocent blood of Uriah the Hittite. So there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Bible always mentions all those things. Peter is a heroic character in the Bible. Peter's a man who's a man of action. He's a man of action, but also a man of impulse. He does not think oftentimes before he acts. There is a time for us to act without thought. There are certain things that we have to learn to do that become such a part of us that they're just natural. And if you do something long enough, certain things will become natural. I used to be amazed at watching my mother crochet. And she could sit there and crochet and watch the TV and carry on a conversation with you at the same time. Them hands were just working. I got some of that when it came to working on chainsaws. I could tear somebody's saw down, tear it down, get it back going while I was talking to them, while I was answering the phone, while I was waiting on somebody at the front counter. Because I had done it so many times. I wasn't always that way, but it became a second nature to me. We do many things that way. We do it, and it's just an action. It's okay. There's sometimes we need to have action. When you're standing in the middle of the road and you hear a truck horn, that's not the time to look. That's the time to get out of the way. What's that? I've always said, people said, "How come you've been hurt so many times?" I said, "Because I'm that guy that when they say duck, I jump up and say, 'Where?' When actually duck means duck." Impulse. Peter was a man of impulse. He's a reactionary, but oftentimes his impulses cause him to be guilty of speech and actions that are taken without thought. And it causes him to sin in the process, do something he shouldn't do. He followed Jesus for 3.5 years and was there. When we read about one of the disciples that cut off the high priest's servant's ear, that servant's name was Malchus. And the man that chopped his ear off was Peter. Peter didn't intend to cut his ear off. He intended to split his skull. He was reactionary. Jesus told him to put his sword up. Why? Because my kingdom, he said, is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. Peter could fight if he wanted to do battle. This guy was a tough guy. He was a fisherman. This is not like me and you might go fishing, Tommy, where we sit in a bass boat somewhere and we work a trolling motor with our foot and we cast until we're tired. These were guys who pulled in nets and whose hands were rugged, whose muscular physique was amazing because they're pulling in these heavy nets and they're working all day in the hot sun. He was a tough man. He'd be like one of these pulpwood haulers we used to have around when I was a kid. He was a man's man. He could fight a physical battle and not have any problem whatsoever. It wouldn't have bothered him in the least. He wasn't afraid of that. But all of a sudden when he had to stand up in a different way, where he had to stand back and fight a spiritual battle, Peter's not prepared. 3.5 years he's followed Jesus and he's still not ready, and so Peter followed afar off at a distance. Why? Well, he followed afar off. It says in Matthew 26 and verse 58, under the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants. For what reason? To see the end. Think about that motive. He's wanting to know what the outcome's going to be of all this, to see the end. The end of what? He's seen them drag Jesus away. They're carrying him away. He knows they're going to put him to death. He's following to see the end. How morbid is that when you think about it? I mean, if he was going there to defend Jesus, that would be a good pure motive. But he's a coward now. He's in the background, and he's following to see the end. He wants to find out what's going to happen. And in the course of this 3 times, he ends up denying Jesus. That proves that his motive was not where it needed to be, because he was afraid. He had not prepared himself as he should have in his 3.5 years for this outcome that Jesus kept telling them was going to take place. His motive is not so honorable. But at the same time, in fairness to him, perhaps we need to be fair to him and say, okay, he's going to take this all in so he can digest it. So he can get it in his head and wrap his head around it. What's taking place? And what is this really all about? What does this really mean? And what's going to be the outcome? But he's free. Either way, he has taken steps away. We decide how we're going to hear. We decide how we're going to react. It's up to me to decide. Take heed what you hear, Jesus said. Take heed how you hear, Jesus said. So it's up to us to listen, and we have to weed out and we have to find truth. It's there. It's attainable. Jesus says, sanctify them with thy truth. Thy word is truth. Jesus says, you'll know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Truth is impossible to ignore. We can't do anything with it. Once the truth is there and it's laid naked and open and bare and reveals the truth, there's nothing we can do with it but deal with it. And we've got 2 options. We can either take the truth and decide how near we're going to be, or we can decide how far we're going to be. The truth is, when it pertains to Jesus, I've got to decide how near I'm going to be, or I've got to decide how far away I'm going to be. You think about that. If I'm not a Christian, it's because I have decided, or have not yet decided, to be near. I've decided to be far. If I'm a Christian and I'm going to live a faithful life and I'm going to see a place called heaven, I've got to decide how near I'm going to stay or how far away I'm going to allow myself to be. But rest assured that if we allow our sin, our lust, to govern our thinking, we can be right there in the same room where Jesus is at and still be 1,000,000 miles away. And you say, how can we be in the same room? Jesus said, where 2 or more gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. You could be sitting here tonight, and Jesus is here with us, and still be 1,000,000 miles away. Your heart, your mind, your soul, your body, they don't belong to God because you're living for the world. And you continue to allow the world to influence you and determine how close you're going to be or how far away you're going to be. That's why John said, love not the world, neither things that are in the world. The lust of flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life, these things are not of God, they're of the world. How close? How near do you want to be? And how far do you want to remain? Peter followed. But he followed far off. Now what led to this situation? Let's turn to Mark chapter 14. Now let's go down to verse, 27. In fact, let's start at verse 26. And let's read together. And when they had sung an hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. I wonder what kind of piano they had there. When they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. And Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. Now Jesus just told him, you're going to all be scattered. He said, oh, not me. How arrogant was that? Here's the Master, here's the Lord, here's the Son of God who says, all of you are going to be offended. Not me. What he's saying in essence is, hey, all these other guys, I get it, they're going to be offended. They can't be strong enough to stand. Look at them. They're not near the moral fiber I am. They're not near the spiritual giant that I am. They'll all be offended, but not me. That was arrogant on Peter's part. He boasted. He says, although all, that's everybody, shall be offended, yet will I not, or will not I. And Jesus saith unto him, verily I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he spake the more vehemently, if I should die with thee, I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. So see, Peter wasn't alone. They all jumped in and said, oh no, not us. We're here for the long haul. But were they? When they got in the garden, the whole tune changed. Peter's overconfident. His overconfidence caused the others to step up and be as overconfident as he was. There was zeal there to the point of arrogance. You know, that's one of the things that God hates. In Proverbs chapter 6, Solomon talks about 6 things that God hates, and he says 7 are an abomination unto him. He says a proud look, he says a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. Think about that last part of that. And he that soweth discord among the brethren. He talked about pride at the very first. Peter's proud and he's arrogant. But what did he mean by discord? That means division. You know, when I live a life of sin, there are certain things when I do that brings about a discord with the family of God. My lifestyle might bring about a discord. My lifestyle might bring about reproach on the church. That is undeserving to all those that are faithful, but is a consequence of my actions just the same. My sin not only matters to me, but my sin matters to those that are faithful. My encouragement matters, my lack of encouragement matters. When everybody's come together and you decide that you don't want to be here, for whatever reason that might be, and it is not a reason but an excuse, you're not helping to build up the congregation, but rather you're bringing about a discord. You're bringing about a lack of enthusiasm. It's a horrible thing to go into a congregation where there's a half a dozen folks and they're struggling. They're trying to hang on with everything they've got and they have nobody who's encouraging them. That's a terrible place to be. In order for the church to have zeal, it's got to start with me. And it's got to start with you. And then my zeal is going to impact you. Your zeal is going to impact the next person. Their zeal is going to impact the next person. But when we take this hodgepodge approach that we often take to New Testament Christianity, and we be here because, oh, it's time, I got to go, and we never give it another thought other than it's time, I got to go, or oh, it's time, I got to go, but I'm not going today. What do you think that does for the attitude of the congregation? Shouldn't it be on my part as a child of God that it's already a gimme? We got 2 or 3 golfers in here that play pretty regular. We got several probably that play. Grant, you know what a gimme is? Yeah, that's so close you got to get it, right? It ought to be a gimme. It's so close that you ought to get it. It's so close you ought to understand that here's where we need to be. And that needs to be something we purposed, not this morning, not this afternoon, not Wednesday at 5 o'clock, but it's a done deal. How do we give of our means every week? We're supposed to give as we've been prospered, so that tells us when to give. We gather that collection on the first day of the week. That also tells us when to give. How much to give is determined by what we believe that we've been prospered. Do you get up on Sunday morning and when you get here, you open up your wallet or your purse, or you reach in your pocket and you find your change and whatever you scratch through and you say, okay, I'm going to put this in? Is that what it means to purpose, to plan? Now, we give according to as we've prospered, and so for some of us, that's not much that we can do, but it doesn't matter because Jesus recognized that with his 2 mites, above all that large amount of money that was cast in by those that had much. The reason is because she purposed, she planned. Her 2 mites counted more than millions that could have been put in by anybody else simply because she purposed and she planned. I remember when I first obeyed the gospel, me and Tammy were coming. We didn't have a lot of money set aside for that because we were living for the world. And so it was limited what we could do for a while, but you know what? As soon as I could, I changed that. My priorities changed. I think that we have to purpose and plan. I think with the same amount of enthusiasm, we have to purpose and plan what we're going to do on the first day of the week. That day is set aside for us to come together and worship God in spirit and truth. Wednesday night's the same thing. That day is set aside for us to come together and study together God's Word, that we can be strengthened and we can be built up by the common faith that we share. If that's not your mindset, you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. You're the one that's part of the problem that we're trying to change. Our mindset needs to be that we're going to be zealous. We need to encourage one another and bring out the very best in each other. And if I'm not bringing out the very best in you, that means I'm bringing out something mediocre, or even worse, I'm bringing something out that's less than the best. Is that the mindset I'm supposed to have as a Christian? Is that how I demonstrate the command of Jesus, that we love one another? Bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. That's the law of love. It includes encouragement. It includes strength. There's strength in numbers. It includes, above all things, a faithful mindset. But Peter, bless his heart, he's still trusting in himself. We've got to learn to trust in God and not in self. A plan of Jesus unfolded over 3.5 years, and these guys still were listening, but they weren't hearing. Are you listening? More important, are you hearing? Take heed what you hear. Take heed how you hear. Oh Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his own steps. Jeremiah 10 and verse 23. You can't do it by yourself. And you can't do it on your own terms, because it simply will not work. If we could do it by ourselves and we can do it on our own terms, Jesus would never had to come and die to begin with. We don't have this figured out, but God does. And God shows us the way, the direction, the course that you and I must walk if we're going to be pleasing to Him. And only when we are pleasing to Him are we going to walk our way into a place called heaven. But we say, perhaps Had I been there, I'd have done it differently. That's what Peter said. Though all these be offended in thee, yet not I. When we get there, Lord, I'm going to do it differently. And that's not what he did. That's what he said. That's not what he did. We say, I'd have done it differently. That's what we say, but that's not what we do. Because we find ourselves on many occasions in a situation where we're ashamed of Jesus. And the reason I say that is because when my friends entice me to do something that's contrary to what God wants, instead of saying no, I said, okay, or maybe. Or we allow ourselves to associate with those that are going to bring us down as a child of God. So I'm not saying okay, I'm saying maybe, and I'm saying no, not at all. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. But I'd have done it differently. I'd have been there, what I'd have done. It's kind of like folks without children. You ever notice folks without children know how to raise children better than anybody else does? If it was me, what I'd do is, well, it's not you. And let's see what you do when you get there. I remember many years ago there was an older gentleman in the congregation that was dying, and somebody made the remark, he cried a lot, and they said, that's a lack of faith. I said, you know why you're able to do that and say that? No, why? I said, because you're not dying. When it's your turn, it'll maybe be different. Might not. Might not. But there's a certain fear about leaving this life, not because we don't want to go to a place called heaven, but there's a fear of leaving those behind that we love. There's a fear of those that we are entrusted to care for, and our concern is, are they going to make it? And I want to stay here as long as I can to help them make it. I've said for years we want to stay here as long as we can, but not a minute, not a second longer than we have to. That's the way that life works. And sooner or later we reach a time where we're saying, I'm ready, if we live long enough. But we don't become weary in well-doing, because we know that we'll reap in due season if we faint not. Peter not only boasted, but we find that Peter slept. We're going to run out of time, but if you go to Matthew 26, let's go there and look. I don't care what time it is. Matthew 26, let's go down to verse 36. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto his disciples, sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, that be Peter, James, and John, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, what? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he went again the second time and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then cometh he to the disciples and saith unto them, sleep on now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. So Peter brags, now he sleeps. I can understand that. Me and Tammy first got married for a long time. I could sleep through anything. You could drive a freight train through the living room, and I'd sleep. And it'd storm, and she'd be scared of the storm, and she'd try to wake me up, wake me up, wake me up. I'll never forget one night, it had been storming, and we had this big glass cover over the bed on the light. It hung right over the foot of the bed. And I guess we had a fan or something up there. I don't think there was a ceiling fan, but anyhow, somehow the nut on that glass cover had vibrated loose, and that thing fell and crashed on the foot of that bed. Buddy, I woke up that night. Wasn't any problem. She didn't have to prod me or poke me or anything. I thought the whole house had caved in. I remember another night when she tried to wake me up, she said, there's somebody out there. She'd do that a lot, and I'd say, it'll be all right, and I'd go back to sleep. No, there's somebody out there. I see the light on in your truck. Well, that got my attention. And I sailed in there and I grabbed a 45 Colt off the top of the refrigerator and had it in my hand, opened the door, and sure enough, there was somebody in my truck. And they had been coming toward the house, and they turned to go away, and I recognized their hair. Now, I had the gun on me, and it was cocked and ready to go, and it was brother-in-law Joel. And he turned around and saw me with that 45 in my hand, and he, in the dark, I could see him turn ghostly white. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I was looking for some jumper cables. I said, son, not at 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, come knock on the door. He said, well, I was coming up there to knock on the door when you came to the door, but I was afraid I was going to wake you up. I said, you almost got shot. Come off for clothes. Peter slept. He slept. He was in danger because he relaxed at a crucial time. We got to pay attention. We don't need to relax where our lives are concerned. Not with our spiritual well-being. We don't need to snooze. We don't need to slumber. We need to be alert. We need to be watchmen. We need to pay attention. We need to pay attention to the dangers that surround our own lives. And as important, the lives of those that are entrusted in our care. We cannot be oblivious to what's going on with our children. We need to be aware of their spiritual well-being. We're the ones that they are entrusted to, and it's our responsibility to guide them in the paths of righteousness and keep them in the direction they need to go. And we need to be aware enough of what's going on with them, we can see the changes that take place. Because when they reach a certain age, they're going to start changing. Things are going to change because they're at the age now, they're being tempted in all points, like as we are. And they're going to be just like we are. Jesus was the only one tempted in all points yet without sin. When temptations overtake them, they're going to yield. And when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Is that what you want for your kids? Be serious about it. Think about it. Who in here wants to go to hell? Raise your hand. Not a single soul. Who in here wants their children to go to hell? Raise your hand. Not a single soul. Isn't that amazing? I've been looking at some verses. I think there's about 7 of them where it talked about the children of Israel causing their children, that'd be the adults, children of Israel, causing their children to walk through the fire for the god Molech. Do you know what that meant? That meant that Israel sacrificed their own children on these altars to this god Molech. Are we willing to let our children walk through the fire? That's what we're doing if we don't pay attention to what's going on. That's what we're doing if we stick our head in the sand and allow them to do anything and everything that they want to do. They're children. And they're entrusted in our care. We need to make those hard decisions that they're not going to make. I watched today, we all ate lunch. Tammy had lunch fixed real good, had a gumbo type thing fixed. It wasn't gumbo, what do you call that? What? Jambalaya, yeah. I'm old, I'm stupid. Thank you so much. I know the difference, I just can't get the words spit out. And I looked up there and Brody, go in there, and there's the jambalaya, there's salad, there's bread, and there's cookies. And look over there, and Brody's got a chocolate chip cookie, and he's sitting there eating. I was thinking about the Seinfeld episode where he was talking about an appetite. He said, used to, I'd go get something, my mom would say, don't eat that cookie, you're going to spoil your appetite. He said, I'm a grown man now. He said, I found out I got lots of appetites left. If I want to spoil it, I will. So I'd call her and say, Mama, guess what? I'm spoiling my appetite. And she'd say something, I'd say, it's all right, I'll have another. If you let kids choose, they'll eat a bag full of candy and never eat anything that's good for them. They'll be running around the house and ricocheting off the walls, eating all that chocolate. We let them do that sometimes, but we don't let them do it every day because we can't afford the dentist bill when the day is done. Why not make the right spiritual decisions for them? Because that's a whole lot more important than a smile. A smile says everything, but you can fix a smile. But if their spiritual well-being is not where it needs to be and they are lost because of it, I can't fix that. And you can't fix that. That's something we have to work on step by step, day by day, week in, week out, month in, month out, until they finally reach the point where they're on their own and they figure it out for themselves. So be watchful. Watch and pray. Peter was told by Jesus, watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 6, therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. Jesus had warned Peter, but Peter just simply did not listen because his zeal was misguided. Everything he did from the point where Jesus gave them warning until the end was a rash act, not in harmony with the Lord's will. Contrary, everything, to the very nature of the kingdom of God. Contrary to the work that was at hand at that present time. We have to be watchful. What and why will we find Peter at this place? We find him there 3 times. We're not going to read it. We're out of time. 3 times they ask him if he's one of them, and he denies it. He finally curses and swears with an oath. He denies. Curses and swears. Matthew 26, verses 69 through 76. What made him reach this state, this place where he denies? Well, it's actually a logical conclusion to the course of action that Peter had chosen. We subject ourselves day in and day out to things that are not in our best interest spiritually. And we continue to expose ourselves day in and day out, and we don't look away. We don't turn away. We don't abstain. We stay around every appearance of evil. And we continue to tempt ourselves and tempt ourselves and tempt ourselves. Can we hope that by accident we're going to endure if we're not willing to make a stand? No. Can't happen. But the beauty is, Peter returned. You and I can return if we don't wait too long and it become too late. The right response to sin, well, when Jesus was there and he was being tried, the cock crowed, Peter denied him 3 times, and Jesus looked upon Peter. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. He remembered. And so he eventually pulled himself together. And on the day of Pentecost, preached a powerful sermon. As I mentioned at the very first, and this is part of it I want to get in because I want you to think about this. Sometimes we have to face things like this. I want you to think about this. Peter's act was the ultimate act of betrayal. There's nothing he could have done that would have been more betraying to the innocent one, to Jesus, than what he did. We see in Peter's response when he goes out and wept bitterly, he knew he had betrayed him. He had betrayed him. There was no doubt in his mind that he had betrayed the Son of God. He couldn't look on him. That look from Jesus, Peter couldn't stand that look. It's kind of like that look you get across a crowded room when you're a kid and you know something that now has been done, you've been busted, you've been caught, and as soon as everybody leaves, you're going to die. Peter went out and wept bitterly. But it brought about the right response to his sin. He repented. That was a result of godly sorrow. And he was faithful, and on the day of Pentecost, he preaches that powerful lesson, and in the household of Cornelius, in Acts chapter 10, he preaches another powerful lesson. Now, he's not the sinless one, but one who followed him, who was without sin. But he has betrayed him. His pardon would not and could not come until Peter was truly converted. Just think about that. What do you mean that he was truly converted? He'd been with Jesus 3.5 years. Luke chapter 22 and verse 31. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. When thou art converted. Jesus once said he wasn't ready. He thought he was. But Jesus said, when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. What does that prove to me? It proves to me that sincerity and truly allowing yourself to be distanced from God can take place at the same time. In the garden, Peter, James, and John slept. And Jesus said, watch and pray, enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Matthew 26 and verse 41. Am I? Are you truly converted? Make your mind up. Every time we come together, we have an opportunity to make our minds up. When we leave, we have all week to think about things spiritual, if we choose to, and make our mind up and decide whether or not I'm truly converted. Because only when we're truly converted can we strengthen the brethren. When thou art converted, that means changed. Strengthen the brethren. Oh, we've changed a little. Some of us has changed a lot. Some of us are changing more and more every day. But every day that I live as a Christian, it's all about change, 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 change. Because Paul said, each day I die daily. But I live. Yet it's not me that lives, but it's Christ Jesus living in me. Wake up in the morning and say to yourself today that Jesus is going to live in me, because I'm going to be dead to the world. And then, when we do that, we can strengthen the brethren. If you have a need in any way tonight to respond to the invitation, you can come now. All together we stand and we sing to encouragement.